Queen Elizabeth, your cousin Mary has returned to take up her throne in Scotland.
The Queen!
My dear cousin Elizabeth, I hope we might meet in person, that I might embrace you. But ruling side by side, we must do so in harmony, not through a treaty drafted by men lesser than ourselves.
My dear cousin, let our nations cherish each other as we would, two kingdoms united.
How did the world come to this?
Wise men servicing the whims of women.
And what about writing women's stories for the two of you?
Well, one of the things that I know Josie and I were both drawn to in John's book was that he takes quite a bold approach to looking at these stories. Typically, Elizabeth we think of as this sort of hardened, cold person who was sort of fully formed, and Mary is often portrayed as this passionate, impulsive, reckless person. But what John posits and then proceeds to prove is that Mary was actually quite politically savvy, that the choices she was making were actually well thought out and not driven purely by emotion. And Elizabeth was much more insecure and indecisive early in her reign. In many ways, Mary brought a sort of example of leadership and strength that Elizabeth learned from, and the Elizabeth we came to know, in some ways, was burnished by the presence of Mary, which is a complete reversal of what the normal stereotypes are, and has a lot to say about the complexity of power. Add to that the fact that female monarchs at that time were a huge anomaly, and they were facing the challenges of that. It just makes for really compelling drama that has, I think, a lot of relevance and poignancy to the here and now.
What sort of embellishments did you make in your version of it?
I mean, in the film, Elizabeth and Mary absolutely have to meet, because although that's a dramatic elaboration of history, the drama can only work if the two queens look each other in the eye, and that's the way their characters are fully realised. I would also add, because the history police have, certainly in this country, have been out a bit on this, they need to do some more homework, because in 2010, 6 years after I wrote the book, new documents appeared in an auction house, Sotheby's, in London, which make it clear that actually, even 18 months before the execution, certainly a conversation, and possibly a meeting, was still on the cards. It never happened, but actually this big what if is not so far removed from reality.
And as a first-time feature director, then what challenges did you face in taking on this project?
Well, yeah, I mean, I should say it's my first feature. It's also the first time I've ever realised anything for the screen. So having spent a career in the theatre trying to get designers and actors to imagine and act landscape, to be standing on a mountain in Scotland with more supporting artists or extras than you can fit into my tiny theatre in Covent Garden. Playing an army was just one of the great thrills, and having spent my life trying to poetically infer something, to be in this incredible medium of filmmaking and to be able to use landscape to talk about character was just extraordinary.